Hello and welcome to another video. So today we've got the Dragon Prebuilt. We're slowly getting through these. We've only got a few more to go. We're just about at the halfway mark here. Actually, I believe we're exactly at the halfway mark, and Dragon is one of the few prebuilts I'm actually really happy with as a deck. The value in the deck is pretty decent. Both Iron Straha and Zoe are both really nice cards to have and work well in both formats, which means you're getting a lot of value out of them. As far as golds go as well, again, a lot of value. I mean, True Dragon is an amazing gold to have, and Dragon Cleaver Roy is another great card, along with Alia, which is another great card to have as a triple. Of course, I'm just looking at the pre-built that I've set up here. The other pre-builts do, of course, have the animated card, which is pretty nice. But overall, this deck does really well in rotation format at the moment, at least from the testing I've done. I was surprised by how close most of the games were. Although I was still on the losing end of most of them, it was still extremely down to the wire, and I think with a little more practice I could definitely bring that up and probably get this deck to about a 40 to 45% win rate in rotation currently. At least at a master level. If you were definitely playing in earlier ranks, this deck will do an amazing job for you. So as far as playability goes for beginners, definitely a very nice deck to pick up, and again has a lot of value in it and things that won't go out of style anytime soon. I mean, it gives you pretty much every card you will need for Dragon as a base. You may want to add in a few more legendaries as things go, like the 2-drop legendary for Dragon is an amazing card, definitely something I would put in this deck. Maybe consider a Linworm if you wanted to run that, but everything else is great. So saying all that, we're going to get right into it and check this out. So the one win I had with this deck was against Sword, which isn't too bad at all. Sword is still quite a strong deck, so being able to win in rotation with a pre-built isn't bad. As I mentioned though, most of my games still end up as losses, as they do with every pre-built deck, because I am playing in Master Rank and pre-builts don't do great against a lot of the current meta decks, but that doesn't mean they don't have a fighting chance at all. They still do fairly well in regards to playability. And as I mentioned, in lower ranks, it's definitely going to be something that you can take advantage of. So starting off with the early Dragon Oracle is always a good way to go if you are starting out with this deck, as it does ramp you up quicker. So even if you have to avoid playing a card, I always recommend going for Dragon Oracle first. Dragon Cleaver Roy, most typically you will aim for the removal card, but sometimes you may want to take the ramp. It really is very situational though, ramping with Roy. I find that most of the time I am taking the removal. And pretty easy way just to remove their entire board there. Opponent really just flooded 1/1s, which wasn't an issue for us at all. And this frontline Cavalier again won't be an issue. Can be very easy to deal with. Leave them with very few cards. Plus we can also go for some ramp and clean out their entire board, so why not? So as you can see, this deck does fairly well. Even this Sword player I would say is playing average, so pretty reasonably for a Sword deck. It's not like they've just done nothing, they've played pretty reasonable cards all the way through so far. The real tell is when it comes to turn 7, when things like Arthur can drop, then you can run into some trouble, but for the most part this deck does a fairly good job at dealing with itself. With this deck I do tend to take Black Breath most of the time, because dealing with bigger followers can be a problem. So it's nice to have a card that allows me to easily deal with them. And we can pretty much play Canyon of Dragons for free, go for a Water of Orca, start setting ourselves up for the long term. Lancer of Tempest is a little disappointing, but I mean, it does end up actually removing that, so I can't complain too much there. And with a Basilisk and a Goblin Mount Ogre, plus a Dragon, we've now developed quite a stable board. I did expect the Goblin Mount to die, that was pretty much predictable at that point. A second Lancer of Tempest isn't something I was hoping for, but it's not the worst situation that could happen. And we got a second Canyon set up, which means we are going to spawn double dragons and continue to spawn dragons for another 3 turns. So the Honorable Knight Definitely a nice card to drop. It seems to be pretty popular in Sword at the moment. Not a deck I've looked into too much though. So this is where things like our 4-drop removal come in handy, removing big threat without having to waste our dragons, as they are going to be our lifeline for winning this matchup. Queen Mangus of the black, so they're just protecting their board, so not really an issue. Another Canyon of Dragons, an immediate follow-up. You really can't go wrong when you're drawing canyons like this. It's definitely what helped us win this game, but to consider that the pre-built automatically has 3 canyons in it is a really, really good value. So Celia of Despair Messenger was a fairly dangerous card. They could have done more if they had more. They just luckily didn't. They were just short of lethal, which was good and allowed us to luckily win this game pretty nicely. And then our next game is against Portal, a game that we didn't win but that we came very close to having. It does go to show how good this deck is when it can compete with some of the top decks at the moment. It's just closing games that I seem to have had a little bit of struggle with, or just barely being able to scrape by, like you did see with that Sword game. It was very close, and that is what your games will be like. For both sides, both the Dragon side and the opponent side will always be very, very close when it comes to games with this deck. So White Worm, another great card, run in a lot of Dragon decks because it does have a good amount of value to it. I decided that I want to go and try and take this early, get the ramp. This is one of the situations where ramping was probably the most beneficial thing I could do. So they did get the early Sylvia, which definitely helped them out. It was a little annoying. If they don't get the early Sylvia, usually you have a much better matchup. Not that it would probably matter in the long run, but in the short run, it definitely is a pain. So Flower Doll, Hamlin, again, not too bad, not really an issue. They are generating a lot of puppets though. So a nice little 1-1. Now we have a couple of ramps, so we are going to be able to get ahead a little bit and set up our Dragon's Nest. Is going to both heal us and give us a card, so why not? And we get a pretty good chance to play the Canyon. I mean, playing it now, definitely not the worst spot. But Puppeteer, again, not great. Most likely what they duplicated with Hamlin. It wouldn't surprise me if that was the case. But we should be able to pretty much take care of this. We've got good removal. We can remove most of it. Go face. They do have a lot of puppets, so again, we're going to struggle in that situation because they do have a lot of ways to go for storm damage. So every bit of damage we're taking now is extremely dangerous. But we have developed quite a nice board.
The battlefield belongs to humanity.
Accept harmony.
Creation is destruction.
So it's not the easiest board to deal with. Even for a Portal player, they are going to use a good amount of resources on it. So making sure they got space for puppets makes sense. So they can draw. Goblin Mount. A nice comfortable 2 breaths. I mean, why not? And again, we've secured our board quite nicely. This is what we can do with this deck, being able to get some bigger followers on board consistently, continually stack them up. The only real problem is whether they can deal with this in an effective manner. And it's a matter of how I spend my resources, which isn't always the best thing.
Not enough enhancements to the suit. Rescuing people's a hobby of mine.
So we go for the Dragoncraft roleplay. I could have probably played this out a little bit better. If I didn't use the ward there the way I did, we could have at least mitigated a lot of this potential damage that we're about to take. which means we probably could have had a chance to win. I'm just not sure exactly how many puppets they would have had total in the end. I'm assuming that they've used everything here, so they still probably would have beat me down pretty hard, but it would have at least gave me a better chance of surviving. Especially since we had irons, which would be an instant kill there. So it definitely made for a very strong deck, surprisingly. It's honestly now my top pre-built deck that I've played so far. We have only got 4 more to go, so yeah, we're definitely at the halfway point now. So, I mean, we're covering these reasonably slowly. I could speed them up, but I really just want to make sure I'm covering these in a manner that I'm happy with and that you guys can be happy with. And these are stuff that will be preserved for a longer term, so it does have a playlist for all the pre-builts for set 4, and every pre-built going forward we'll do something similar and we'll cover them all and do our big roundup. But right now I'm definitely putting this above sword, so our current listing is number 1 dragon, 2 sword, 3 rune, and then probably 4 forest at the moment when it comes to both playability and overall value. As far as individual values go, dragon I'm definitely putting in an 8 for value. It's got really decent value to it and I really enjoy that. And as for playability, it's another 8. It's gotta be there. It's up there with all the others. So out of 10, that's pretty decent. Hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, hit that like button and subscribe for more content. You can find the other pre-built decks in the playlist, which should appear somewhere on the screen, but that'll be fine. And if you did, of course, want to see more of these, I will be pumping them out every second day along with our normal videos that we've got coming out. So hope you guys do enjoy it, and until next time, see ya.